Do your kids struggle to write the letters of the alphabet? Or maybe they just don't seem to be getting it quite yet. In today's episode, we're featuring a listener question from Rebecca.
You've got mail.
So I have a child. He has a hard time getting his hand to do the lowercase e movement. I've tried teaching him do a C and loop it in. I've tried many different things. I've tried games. I've tried doing the snail thing. I've tried multiple different ways, but he just can't get his brain to tell his hand to do the loop-de-loop for E's. And he also has some issues with the S and sometimes a problem with similar lowercase letters that have the little loopy thing involved in them. Any suggestions?
First of all, Rebecca, I just want to say that you're doing a great job because you took the time to ask a question and seek out an answer to a problem that a child was having. And oh boy, do I have answers for you. You're definitely in the right place. Now, I think Rebecca probably already knows this, but just so that we're all on the same page, there is no magic pill for perfect handwriting. It's a developmental skill, and kids are ready for it when they're ready for it, and not one moment sooner. So here are 3 easy steps that you can take to set your kids up for success with handwriting. Now, the first step is to understand the importance of developing fine motor skills, because when it comes to those letters with those loops and squiggles, like Rebecca mentioned, the lowercase letters, they can be extremely difficult or even impossible in some cases for some young children to make. You see, it's because young children are more successful with handwriting when they have well-developed fine motor skills. These are the prerequisites to writing or handwriting. So this means that the muscles, the small muscles in their fingers and their hands, need to be strong before they can begin to hold a writing tool like a pencil and be successful at making letters. There is so much more to it than that, but that's just the gist. When we spend time developing the strength and the dexterity in the fingers and hands, we are preparing our children not only for writing, but for success with other skills like grasping or picking up small objects, fastening their own clothing, think zipping, tying shoes, buttoning, and all of those good things, feeding ourselves, and more. The trick is to exercise those small muscles in the hands at the right time. And that's before we ever ask them to make specific marks on paper with pencil. There is no amount of forcing, practicing, or punishing a child that will speed up the handwriting process, despite the best efforts of Catholic school nuns everywhere. In fact, there are certain steps to follow when it comes to introducing young children to handwriting and writing tools. But if we begin handwriting instruction before their little hands are ready for paper and pencil tasks, or we jump straight to writing on lines with pencils, that, my friends, is a recipe for handwriting failure. And we'll be diving into specific strategies that you can use to help your students later in this episode, so you're definitely going to want to keep listening or watching until the very end. Now, step 2 is all about having developmentally appropriate expectations for the age of the child that you're working with or the children in front of you, right? Now, Rebecca didn't mention the age of the child that she's asking about, so I'll focus on ages 3 to 5 because those are the preschool years, right? Now, when it comes to 3-year-olds, it is all about exposure to seeing written letters like the ones in their names or the ones that they see in the world around them on signs and logos, right? It is not about getting them to write letters on paper. Instead, with 3-year-olds, we focus on developing their fine motor skills. The best thing you can do with 3-year-olds to help them develop these skills is to use specific tools and toys to help them practice in fun and playful ways. Trying to teach 3-year-olds how to write anything or asking them to write specific letters would be like teaching harder instead of smarter. Now, when it comes to 4-year-olds, their small muscles are still developing. Remember, this is a very gradual process, and they need more time and more practice before they can begin writing letters legibly, right? So at this age, expecting them to write perfectly, especially lowercase letters with little squiggles and loops, that's an unrealistic expectation and would set both you and the child up for failure. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some 4-year-olds out there with really good handwriting, but it's usually related to strong fine motor skills. So, for example, in my own case, I have noticed in my classroom over the many years that children who played outside a lot prior to coming to my pre-K 4 classroom, they played outside and had lots of opportunities to climb and crawl through tunnels. They typically had above average fine motor skills compared to their peers because they had more time and practice developing those muscles, right? The core muscles. So they're crawling and they're climbing. Those are helping develop their gross motor muscles, right? Because those come first, and then we're going to work on the fine motor later. So the children who've had lots of opportunities to do that tend to be more successful. And as for 5-year-olds who are in kindergarten, they're going to be expected to write letters on lines at some point during that school year. So fine motor skills really need to be well developed during the year. Notice how I said during and not before, because being able to write perfectly should never, ever, ever be a requirement for entering kindergarten. My point here is that we need to align our expectations with child development so we can support our students instead of frustrating them, or even worse, making them hate school. And Rebecca also mentioned that the child just can't seem to get his brain to tell his hand what to do when it comes to making those little squiggles in lowercase letters. I already have a podcast episode about writing uppercase versus lowercase and why writing in uppercase letters is much easier for children who are 4 years old because they're in that stage of development at that time, and writing those squiggly loops and those curls, those are things that come later. So that information that Rebecca gave us about his brain not telling his hand, that is important information, right? It tells us that he's not developmentally ready to do the task that we're asking him to do. So what comes before? We have to take a step back and think about what comes before writing those squiggles and those loops and those swirls for little hands. So first we adjust our expectations with developmentally appropriate practice in mind. Then we focus on developing fine motor skills, right? And then we can move forward from there. So you might be wondering then what comes next, right? And that is daily opportunities and experiences to practice. You see, young children in preschool and pre-K benefit the most from having daily experiences and opportunities to develop their fine motor skills. So here are some of the basics to help you get started in your own home or classroom. First things first, I would be remiss if I didn't start with Play-Doh, because Play-Doh is the perfect fine motor tool for all young children starting at age 3. And I just think that so many benefits of fine motor skills can be developed through the use of Play-Doh. Children are squishing, squeezing, manipulating the dough, rolling the dough, doing all kinds of things. And I did want to let you know that we just did a podcast episode all about all things Play-Doh. And we will put a link to that in the show notes for you. There's also my free printable Play-Doh recipe that you can grab while you're there as well. Next up, I want to talk about salt trays. So these things right here that you can see on your screen, these are called sensory writing trays. The original thing that I think they were called was salt trays because we used to use them with salt back in the day. But now they have lots of beautiful colored sand that you can buy at the craft store. That works even better because you can change it up. And if they have little cuts on their fingers, which a lot of little kids tend to do, you don't get kids saying, that hurts, because salt is not good to rub into your wounds. But using these cards here, you can see that I have a card here on the screen, and it has a little picture to indicate the starting point, and it has the line. These are considered pre-writing lines. So they're just very, very simple. I'm going to put my finger in the tray like I would invite a child to do and have them make that line in the sand or salt or whatever you want to call it. Of course, I have a whole set of these in my shop, the Pre-K Pages shop, and we'll put a link to those in the show notes for you below. But then all you have to do is take that card out, shake it up, ta-da, put another card in, and now they're making another shape. So I have a set of these for the entire school year with many, many different themes that you can use to change it up. You can switch the colors of the sand in the trays as well. I just ordered a bulk bunch, little sand packets in different colors from Amazon. And yeah, so there you go. Super simple and easy. Next, I want to talk about squirt bottles. These little things that you can get at the dollar store are fantastic for developing fine motor skills. They're very interesting to young children, right? Because it's not often they get to use a squirt bottle. You can get really small ones at the dollar store for sure. But what you're going to do is you're going to show kids how to use these. What's the appropriate use? Of course, you don't want them squirting each other in the face. But what are the appropriate uses? And then when they pick them up, they are going to grip with those fingers in the front and squirt. And so some ways that I have used these in the classroom is to hand them out at recess, and kids can go, quote unquote, water the grass or the plants or the bushes or whatever there is. A lot of times they can use them like on an asphalt concrete type of surface, just to maybe erase chalk pictures that they've drawn. Any plants you have in the classroom, they can water those. There's a bunch of different ways that you can use these. I like to use them also outside in the winter. If you live in a place that receives snow, you can squirt colored water into the snow, lots of different ways. But these water bottles, so squirt bottles rather, are wonderful for fine motor because children are highly motivated to use them. Next up, we have some poke pages. That's P-O-K-E. And I know it sounds silly, and you're probably wondering what in the world this has to do with fine motor skills, and I will show you. So this is a nail art tool, and I guess it's used for making dots or swirls on fancy nails. I would not know, but they're very cheap on Amazon. I got a package of 4. They're in my fine motor shop. There's a link in the video description. You just have to click the little arrow to expand it and see the links. But all they do is push down on this little thing, and it's not sharp. It has a little round ball on the end. I think initially, back in the day, I used to use toothpicks. So they are poking, and then they can, when they're done poking all the holes in the picture, right, they can hold it up to the window and see the light shine through the little holes. And so kids love these. Oh, and I have it on a piece of foam. There's a piece of craft foam behind it to give it a soft surface. That way I can poke through. If it's just sitting on the flat surface, like the hard surface here in the tray, it would not poke through. So I need to have something behind it that has some give. You could use cardboard, styrofoam, carpet. A lot of people use carpet squares. Whatever you've got to use, you can use for this activity. Next up, we have a hole punch activity. Now, these are kid-friendly little hole punches here that don't require a lot of effort on their part. And this activity is especially good for 4-year-olds. I would not expect a 3-year-old to be able to have the dexterity and strength in their fingers to do this activity in particular. But for 4 and up, this is a great activity. Again, using a very fun tool that they're motivated to use. And these strips are from my farm bundle. And these are hole punch strips. And so you're going to just give the little hole punches to kids, have them slip it between the 2 pieces here, and then squeeze. And so they're exercising those fine muscles or small muscles in their index and their thumb. Some children, their hands are small, so they might be using more fingers than that. And I have had children who like to get the paper in between the two pieces and then use two hands to push the hole puncher down. And those are kids who really struggle with that. But look, I got the perfect punch on that one. So these strips are in my farm bundle, and the link to the hole puncher is in my Amazon shop. Okay, next up, I have some beginning writing tools. And so I have a couple different versions here. What looks like these little colored rocks right here on the screen, they look like crayon rocks, and that's exactly what they are. So they're little lumps of crayon. They are not shaped like a regular crayon at all, you'll notice. And the only way that you can hold them and make marks on paper with them is to grasp them with your fingers, your index and middle finger and your thumb together, right? So there, I'm just drawing on a piece of scrap paper here. And these are great for your 3-year-olds when they start, well, that's not a nice color, is it? When they start making pictures, right? When they start making marks on paper, they can use these crayon rocks and they get a lot more control and they develop that pincer grasp. The other thing is the pencil. So for when your kids are probably about 4 years old or older, and they're just starting to begin to hold writing tools in their hand, like pencils, there's two kinds of pencils that I like. I like these triangular ones. So if you'll see here, they don't roll. And the only way that the children can hold them is with the proper grasp. And so these are from Ticonderoga. They're Tri-Write. There's a link to these in my Amazon shop. At one time, they sold them in half sizes because I definitely like the half size for little kids. The full size ones are basically the size of a tree in their little tiny hands. But now you can see they can hold it much easier. Another one that I like is the golf pencil. Again, these are little tools for little hands, right? So we don't want to give them those big, gigantic, fat, round pencils that basically are the length of their forearm. Because if I gave you a pencil that was the length of your forearm and it was much, much thicker than what you could hold in your hand, you would struggle too. So golf pencils are great, and you can buy golf pencils in bulk for very little amounts of money on Amazon or anywhere else that you can find golf pencils, like the office supply stores or whatever. But those are 3 great tools that you can use. Again, I like the crayon rocks for my 3-year-olds or for my 4 or 5-year-olds who really need to take that step back and develop those fine motor skills first. And then these 2 pencils I like for children who are beginning to learn how to hold a pencil and make marks on paper. And the last one that I have for you today, or to show you today, is the painting one. So far we've talked about using small pencils, right? So something like a triangular pencil, a golf pencil. We've talked about using hole punches, crayon rocks, and nail art tools to do fun fine motor exercises. This last one is about using paint. What could be more fun than using paint in preschool, right? So this one is just, this is from my farm bundle. This is a fine motor painting activity. And you just need Q-tips and the paper and some paint. And all you have to do is invite your kids to dot in the little circles around the image. Now, ideally, I would have 3 different colors out here. And if my kids had learned how to pattern already, I would invite them to pattern on the dots. But it's not just like a little fun thing to do. They're holding the Q-tip. Again, the only way you can hold it is like this, right? And they're going to be most successful if they hold it like that. If they try and grasp it in some odd way, it's going to be a lot harder to do because you can't even see the paper at that point. So anyway, super fun. And of course, when they're done, they could paint the inside if they wanted to. They could even do the letters here. Oops, I got a little too much paint. I'm painting just like a preschooler here, and I didn't even mean to. But anyway, they could do that as well. They just love these types of Q-tip dot painting activities. So there you've got a lot of different fun ways to practice fine motor skills in your classroom. For those of you watching along, there is a link to my Amazon shop in the description below where I have linked all of the different tools that I have shown you in this portion of the episode. Now I want to answer 2 common questions that I get from teachers a lot when it comes to handwriting, especially handwriting practice pages or worksheets and things like that. So the first question is usually, what if the parents of my students expect or want me to send home handwriting practice worksheets or to even do them in the classroom? So I would point them to my fine motor handout. So in cases like that where parents are wanting you to do something that you know is not developmentally appropriate, you as the professional educator need to explain to the parents about child development and how it works in relation to their child, and in this case, handwriting. So I have a free parent or guardian or adult handout that you can use with the parents of your students, and it basically explains exactly what they can do at home to help develop handwriting skills. So if they're asking for sheets, practice sheets to come home, then instead I would explain to them that using these exercises as homework, quote unquote, instead of the practice pages is going to do their children a much greater service. And I don't just put these in a backpack or text them or anything like that. This is actually best done in a event type of a situation. So, for example, you could use the handout that I just showed to you, and you could create a family night or an event night or whatever you want to call it, a fine motor night. And you could have little stations set up around the room that you're using for this event, whether it be your classroom or another room. And parents and children could rotate from station to station and use the materials there. And as they're doing that, you would make sure that you would review the handout with them at some point without the children in the room, if possible, so that they could get a better understanding of how these things actually are more beneficial to their kids than handwriting pages. So the next question is, what if my administrator requires my students to write on lined paper in my classroom? And all I can say to that is I've totally been there and I've done that, okay? And there are a couple of different ways to approach this situation. The first way is the best way. And I can't say that I always took the best way, but the best way is to help educate your administrator about developmentally appropriate practice. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is to use that handout again and show your principal that these are the things that actually help children learn how to write before they ever hold a pencil. And without those fine motor skills in place, those children will continue to struggle because you're asking them to do something they're not developmentally able to do. So they need to know the importance of those fine motor skills and how you are addressing that in the classroom. And so then you could say, well, I use X, Y, and Z and show them the tools and the opportunities that your kids have for daily practice. So that would be my best method. There are other times when my school district at one point purchased a very expensive set of workbooks because publishing companies just love to sell workbooks to school districts. It's a big moneymaker. And my administrator spent a lot of money doing that and therefore made it mandatory that we use these quote unquote workbooks. Now, my administrator had no background in child development whatsoever. So I took that requirement with a grain of salt. And so I, at that point, tore out all the workbook pages and I put them in the writing center. And I don't advocate, that's not the best way to do it, but that's one way I handled it. And then when the administrator required that I show proof that my students were doing the workbooks, I would hang the pages up on a small portion of a bulletin board in our room. And that was that. And that satisfied them, right? Without me actually having to do any instruction and take away from what I knew my children needed to be doing. And I put them out in a center. I don't think that's the best way, but that's one way of handling the situation. I also have a blog post with all of this information in one handy dandy place for you, in addition to this episode. So there's a link in the show notes to my handwriting page. And if you're listening along, it's very simple. It's pre-k pages.com/handwriting. And that will take you right to the handwriting page on the blog with all of this information laid out for your administrator. There you have it, my friends, your step-by-step guide for setting your kids up for success with handwriting. And if you're looking for more in-depth training on this topic or any others, we have more than 70 hours of on-demand professional development for you in my Teaching Trailblazers mentorship program. Specifically, we have 2 trainings with certificates of attendance all about fine motor skills. So I hope that you got some great ideas that you can take back and use in your classroom right away. Rebecca, I hope these ideas help answer your question as well. And until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward. If you think these videos are valuable, you have got to come check out the Teaching Trailblazers program. Teaching Trailblazers is the place for teachers like you to get the professional development resources and support you need to thrive. It's where you can learn relevant, life-changing best practices with professional development created specifically around the challenges early childhood teachers face. It's where you can get access to a complete research-based pre-K curriculum that you can use either to supplement your existing curriculum or use on its own to get 100% of your students kindergarten ready by the end of the year. And it's where you can hang out and connect over all things early childhood with other teachers just like you and me. It's my favorite place on earth, and it will change your teacher life, I guarantee it. Come join us at teachingtrailblazers.com to get more information and apply today. That's teachingtrailblazers.com. I can't wait to see you there.